With an intoxicating mix of beauty, charisma and charm, Sunny was once the most popular woman in wrestling. She was a true bombshell who injected some much needed female energy into the mid-90s WWF. At one time, she was all over the Federation's TV shows, but the same confidence and charm that took her to the top of the business also contributed towards her downfall. In this video, we're taking a look at exactly why Sunny became one of the most hated women in wrestling. Tammy Sytch grew up in New Jersey and attended the University of Tennessee, and that's where she began dating wrestler Chris Candido. Tammy had no plans to enter the wrestling business herself, but she began accompanying Chris to the ring during his time in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Jim Cornette was running the territory at the time, and he saw so much potential in Tammy as an on-screen star that he offered her a 6-month contract. Smoky Mountain soon became a feeder system for the WWF, and that was Tammy and Chris's way into the Federation. In early 1995, the pair made their debut on TV as Sunny and Skip, a pair of obnoxious fitness freaks. Cornette could already sense that trouble was on the horizon when it came to Tammy. She worked for me for 2 years. She didn't drink beer, she never took a pill, she was never late, she was never unprofessional, never argued about a finish, never questioned a promo, she never complained about her check. We go to the WWF, and that's where the problem started, because in hindsight, and probably trying to do a little psychological work, she always had a high opinion of herself, and it was validated by her becoming a big star. Sunny and Skip quickly became a staple of WWF television, and that was largely thanks to her effortless charisma and how natural she was talking on the mic. Her wit and her confidence made her a natural heel as she played up their gym freak personas to antagonise the fans. It was already clear that Sunny was a standout talent. Meanwhile, Candido earned respect in his own right, even being named the most underrated wrestler of the year by Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Sunny and Skip were soon joined by Tom Pritchard, who was now rebranded as Zip, and they captured the tag team titles on the WrestleMania 12 pre-show. But while their on-screen partnership was going from strength to strength, things weren't so perfect backstage. Tammy and Chris were still in the relationship they'd started before entering the wrestling business, but cracks were starting to show beneath the surface. During this time, Shawn Michaels was going through his notorious difficult phase backstage where he was pissing everyone off and he just didn't care. One incident that was widely reported at the time saw Michaels get involved in a violent altercation with a soldier at a bar after trying to flirt with the soldier's girlfriend. The men got into a fight and Michaels was reportedly beaten up. Tammy stepped in to help Shawn and accompanied him to the emergency room. This would mark the beginning of their affair. I was in love with Shawn Michaels when I was 13 years old, so now, being a co-worker and in the same locker room as him, I couldn't help but admire him up close and personal. He was always very nice to me, much different from how he treated the boys, with the exception being the guys in the clique. He was extremely charming and even more handsome and attractive than he was back when I was 13. Tammy and Shawn didn't bother keeping their affair a secret from anybody. In fact, they flaunted the affair right under Chris's nose. In her book, Tammy wrote that she would be intimate with Michaels multiple times a night backstage, and his buddies in the clique would take turns standing guard outside the locker room while they got busy with each other. According to Bruce Pritchard on his podcast, Chris was well aware of the affair. He was definitely internally battling it constantly on a daily basis. Jesus Christ, being there you felt horrible for him because you wanted to shake him. Well, he could have walked away from her and walked away from the situation. He knew, he definitely knew, and he ate him up. The fact that he did nothing made people stop feeling sorry for him. It got to the point where they were thinking, okay dumbass, if you're not going to do anything, You're gonna let this little girl run all over you and do this shit in your face? You don't deserve anyone's sympathy because you're letting it happen and you're not doing anything about it. Doing nothing basically made the situation worse for Candido and the way the guys looked at him. And then it became the viewpoint of Sonny and Shawn like, well, the boyfriend doesn't care, so why should we? It's no surprise that Shawn Michaels didn't think twice about Candido during the affair, given his terrible attitude at the time, but it really speaks volumes about Tammy's character. She later claimed to have been intimate with other wrestlers in the locker room too. In a 2012 shoot interview, she said that she'd slept with Davey Boy Smith after finishing with Michaels. Considering that Smith was married to Diana Hart at the time, his daughter, Georgia Smith, has strongly refuted those allegations. There were also rumours linking Tammy to Bret Hart, although he's always denied that. That story was probably started by Shawn Michaels himself after his infamous Sunny Days promo on Raw in 1997, where he insinuated that the two were having an affair. Bret's wife was said to be furious when she heard those comments live on TV, but Tammy never came out and denied those accusations herself. And to her, it didn't really matter because she was on the rise. She was so popular with the fans by this point, and Vince tried to capitalise on that popularity in every way possible. She'd expanded her managing duties and was also hosting several WWF TV shows. She even began to break into the mainstream, making appearances on MTV and on talk shows. Outwardly, it seemed like the sky was the limit, but backstage, things were starting to fall apart for Tammy. She was increasingly disliked by several people in the locker room, including Bill Moody, who was better known as Paul Bearer. Moody had a soft spot for Chris Candido and took great offence at how Tammy was treating him. Other people backstage were getting sick of her loud mouth and her ego that seemed to be running wild and getting bigger and bigger every time she appeared on TV. And on top of that, she'd allegedly developed a substance abuse problem too, which caused her to become increasingly sloppy. She was showing up late for work, and in some cases, not showing up at all. And there was now a new blonde bombshell in the WWF, Rena Miro, who was better known as Sable. To say that Sonny felt threatened by Sable would be an understatement. Sonny was the first, but man, all of a sudden, the newer model came along. I think it was pretty much 99.5% jealousy. Sable was the hottest thing, and she was blowing Sonny out of the water as far as merchandise sales and everything else. So all of a sudden, there's competition, and there's a new, hotter babe in town, and you've got Sonny that's been here a few years, and she's not showing up on time, she's not coherent a lot of the time, and all of that other good stuff. So now you've got the new model here, and Rena was new, she was willing to do anything, and the reaction she was getting when she walked out was huge. But the tension between the women wouldn't matter for much longer because Tammy's drug abuse had spiralled out of control. By the summer of 1998, she'd repeatedly no-showed events and was lying to cover her tracks. On one occasion, it's reported that she told Linda McMahon that she'd miscarried a baby, but she couldn't provide any medical documentation to back up her claim. When WWF officials asked her to enter rehab, she refused to go, and so they had no choice but to fire her. That marked the end of Tammy's time in the WWF, and her life fell into a deep downward spiral. Just 4 days after she was fired, she appeared for ECW, where she helped Candido defeat Lance Storm. But then in December 1999, Paul Heyman found her passed out in a locker room backstage and fired her. Tammy and Chris then appeared in WCW for a few months in 2000. However, they both suddenly disappeared from TV without explanation. The rumour that surfaced later suggested that Kimberly Page had allegedly found drugs on Tammy backstage in the women's locker room, and so she was let go from WCW too. She'd managed to get fired from all 3 major wrestling promotions in the US in the space of 2 years. In 2005, Chris tragically passed away. He was in the hospital after getting injured during a match, and while he was there, he contracted acute pneumonia. Sadly, he died shortly after from complications. A documentary was produced to reflect on Chris's life, featuring interviews with many of his peers. However, Tammy was not invited to participate, and so she lashed out to anyone who would listen, directing her anger at Chris's family, who were already grieving at the time. Tammy got into a relationship with a New Jersey police officer. It apparently ended on bad terms, and there was a strange turn of events where she turned to New Jack, the infamous former ECW wrestler who was known for being an actual maniac. He claimed that Tammy approached him and asked him to murder the ex-lover, which he decided to decline. As her substance abuse problem increased, Tammy started running out of money, so she starred in a porn movie and started to hustle her remaining fans. Who can forget the absolute cringe fest that came about at a convention where she was charging sad men a premium to get in bed with her and have a photo taken? And then there was the GoFundMe page that she set up, supposedly for medical expenses, and her appearing in a string of shoot interviews talking trash about literally everyone that she'd ever worked with. And eventually, it was the substance abuse that ruined her life entirely. Over the course of 10 years from 2012 onwards, she was arrested multiple times for DUIs, disorderly conduct, third-degree burglary, unlawful possession of a weapon, and a string of other offences. But it was in January 2022 when she was arrested for the final time. A police report stated that she crashed into the back of a man's car, which was stopped at a red light. Witnesses told police that she was speeding when the collision occurred. Toxicology reports later revealed that Tammy's blood alcohol content was more than 3 times the legal limit at the time of the crash. The crash turned out to be fatal, and it resulted in the death of a 75-year-old man. In November 2023, she was sentenced to more than 17 years in prison. Few people in wrestling fell from grace quite as hard as Sunny, and few women were as universally despised by the end of their career.